I tell stories about how we help families and have for, 8 or 9 generations, and make sure everybody understands, hey, they're part of being part of the story, because it's being part of something bigger than yourself, right? That's the essence of leadership, right? How do you get people to work together to do things that are bigger than any of us could do individually?
As a leader, you got to understand your numbers. But the real question is, can you make those numbers mean something? Welcome to How Leaders Lead. I'm David Novak, and every week I have conversations with the very best leaders in the world to help you become the best leader that you can be. My guest today is Roger Crandall, the chairman, CEO, and president of MassMutual. Now, Roger operates in a highly technical world with lots of data and complex financial products. The numbers that drive his business are vital, and he understands them inside and out. But he also understands those numbers can't just stay stuck on a spreadsheet. They need context. They need stories. They need to mean something. You're about to hear from a leader who knows how to take the numbers and revenue goals and bring them to life with real human stories. It's how he engages and coaches people on a level that a lot of leaders just simply miss, especially analytical leaders. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with my good friend and soon to be yours, Roger Crandall. You're a diehard Yankees fan, and yet MassMutual is a signature partner of the Boston Red Sox and Fenway Park. I mean, you're named Roger after Roger Maris. How in the heck did you let this happen?
Oh, it's a sad tale, but one that's been great for MassMutual. Look, I'm a baseball fan, and you can't have the Yankees without having the Red Sox. Coopetition and competition is how the world works. So when we had the opportunity to put the MassMutual brand and partner with the Red Sox also locally with what we do for our communities, it was a no-brainer. Just the way the cookie crumbled. I'm running a Massachusetts company, not a New York company. So, but it's been a great partnership.
That just makes way too much common sense,
My dad was a Red Sox fan, so you do have that.
Oh, there you go. At least you got something in the family there, And it's interesting. As I understand it, you don't have an office. You don't have the typical CEO office. And in this room that I'm looking at right here is a collaboration room. It's where you get together and collaborate. Looks like a great place where you might want to take a nap. But anyway, tell me about just your whole thought process on office space.
Yeah. So look, MassMutual is kind of an amazing company, right? We're a mutual company, as the name implies, which means we're effectively owned by our participating policyholders. So we've got about 4 million members of the company, and the company was started right here in Springfield, coming up on 175 years ago, back in 1851. And that's great. But along the way, boy, there was a lot of hierarchy. We had 7 layers of vice presidents. You were a junior assistant vice president. You got a certain size office, and then you became an assistant vice president. You got a bigger one, and I just did not think that was ultimately going to let us get the most out of all of us. So we ultimately did a couple things. One is we changed our dress code to 2 words: dress appropriately. We used to have, like, literally when I joined here in 1988, a handbook of what you could wear when. And we kind of blew up all the vice president steps. And then we said, well, if we're going to do that, let's blow up the offices as well. So the big giant chairman's office I used to have is now a conference room that anyone can book and use. And I think it's actually done a really good job of helping flatten how the organization works and just making it more comfortable for people to be kind of fully engaged wherever they are in the organization. So I just thought the strong hierarchical stuff was holding us back. And we made that decision, 6-7 years ago now. It was before COVID even. And I think it's really worked.
So what advice can you give leaders on how to be a bureaucracy buster? Because that seems to be kind of what you're into.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, they are insidious little things, and they keep kind of crawling their way back in kind of one way or another. Far and away, one of the biggest things is trying to create an environment where, again, just people are comfortable engaging. I was this morning, really cool. I got to meet with about 25 interns that are here. So these are not just digital natives. These are AI natives, right? This is like the first generation that has been using these new tools already, kind of in a learning kind of environment. And I told them, you have a superpower. You actually know what this stuff is, right? We talk to, every PhD from MIT and every consulting firm in the world, but you've actually been growing up with it. So I'm like, please lean into that. Speak up. Tell us, how we should be thinking about things. So I just try to keep encouraging it. I find people want to speak up. They want to be involved. They want to be part of a growing organization. So you just got to keep at it, because otherwise, bigger companies, at least this one, seems to want to bureaucratize when it can.
Yeah, well, certainly I had to fight it every day myself, and you mentioned that MassMutual is a mutual company, which means it's owned by policyholders, not shareholders. How does that ownership model influence how you lead, Roger?
Yeah, and it took me a while to understand how special having one set of constituents is, and you have to think about it in a multi-generational way. If you think about it, first, let me go ahead and put on the table. No one thinks about life insurance, right? Like, it's just not the kind of thing you wake up and go, yes, today there's a new MassMutual life insurance policy coming out. I'm going to go get in line to get it, right? It just doesn't happen that way, right? But when you start really thinking about it deeply, it starts with being a multi-generational thing. Because guess what? You're dead, right? So it's all about, who do you love? Who do you want to take care of if you're not able there to take care of them? And that immediately leads you to kids and grandkids. And that is humanity at its core. Doesn't matter your politics, doesn't matter anything. We all, love people and we want to take care of them. And it's in this multi-generational way. So this really long-term thinking is where it starts. And we are simply stewards of this organization for the time that we're here. And it's our job, just as we stand on the shoulders of people who came before us who made good decisions for the benefit of generations ahead, we need to make good decisions for the generations that are going to come after us. And it's just really important. I always tell stories about the long-term nature of the company. And it's absolutely wild how that's true. And when people really think about it, they're like, wow, this makes sense. This is like I love co-ops, right? This is like a co-op for my insurance. And it's worked for coming up on 175 years.
You mentioned about life insurance. You don't really think about it. I was flying in with a friend of mine into a mountain city, and we hit a wind shear, and we had to go around before we could land. And the person I was with says, geez, I'm really starting to think about my life insurance. How do you get people to think about life insurance without almost having a near-death experience?
There's an old saying, which is true, in that this is something that is sold, not bought. Occasionally, people think about life insurance around major life events. And then sadly, they think about life insurance when something is going wrong, when it may be too late, right, to get affordable insurance. So it starts with really great financial advisors that understand the role that protection products play in a portfolio. I mean, look, huge opportunities to build wealth over time by investing in equities. I mean, the magic that is the U.S. stock market for Americans is magical. You need to think about protection as well. And that's not just life, which is obviously what most people think about, but it's also morbidity, like what happens if you get hurt. A younger person today, they may look at their financial statement and go, my gosh, I've got no money, or I've got a negative net worth because of a student loan or a mortgage. But your biggest asset is your ability to keep working. And that's not on the balance sheet, right? But you are going to be able to keep working. So disability coverage is really important. Obviously, aging population. I'm part of the kind of the so-called sandwich generation. When you start thinking about caring for elderly parents or grandparents, long-term care is such a powerful product that brings peace of mind to kind of companies. And then the other is, with a little luck, we're all going to live to be 100 to gosh knows how long we're going to live the way technology is going. You don't want to outlive your assets. So lifetime income or longevity protection is the other kind of piece of the three that we do. And it takes a financial professional who understands how these things work as part of a plan. And it means working with clients so that they are aligned with you're aligned with what they're trying to achieve, and helping them do it. And when it all works, it's a magical thing. Obviously CEOs get complaint letters from time to time, but I also get these amazing letters from people that have been with us 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And what we've done is help their families through really tough times. It's noble work that we do, and it's really cool.
That's you use the word noble, and I find that the best companies in the world have a noble cause. How do you take that noble cause that you have and drive that throughout your organization and make it relevant for everybody.
Yeah, it's such a great point. We started off talking about the Yankees, but there is a little football team up here in New England, the Patriots, and they got the saying, "Do your job," and everybody here contributes towards doing the job. Right? It's the advisor out in the field who meets with somebody. It's the person in technology helps make sure that the application can get put in easily. It's the person who served me a nice piece of fish, healthy piece of fish today at lunch. We get free breakfast and free lunch here at MassMutual if you come and work here. We want you to come in the office and enjoy being here. Everybody plays their role. So I think I tell stories about how we help families and have for 8 or 9 generations, and make sure everybody understands, hey, they're part of being part of the story, because it's being part of something bigger than yourself, right? That's, in a certain sense, that's the essence of leadership, right? How do you get people to work together to do things that are bigger than any of us could do individually, right? And for our little corner of the world, which is providing financial security for families, helping people protect their future and secure the ones they love, everyone here plays a part. If any one of us messes up, we don't do it as well as we possibly could. So we all have a role to play, and it ends up being kind of magical at the end.
Speaking of stories, what's a story from your childhood that shaped the kind of leader you are today?
Yeah, I think the big one is, so look, my dad went to work for MassMutual in 1964. So one of us has worked at the company continuously for quite a number of years, 60 years at this point. And I was just a little kid. I didn't know what he did, but I would go in with him to his office and kind of stuff envelopes, because he was a sales guy. So he used to pay me a penny an envelope. And he would send out mailers and hopefully, get a little insurance done. So that being actively involved, like do my job, stuff an envelope was kind of one. And then my uncle's Bob Crandall. He was the CEO of American Airlines, pretty famous executive. So I just knew him as Uncle Bob. But I got to just hear him talk about business. So at an early age, I kind of knew that insurance was something. At an early age, I got to hear Bob talk about the airline business in the frank way that he talks about things, and that was very instrumental to me as I was kind of growing up as a kid.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned your Uncle Bob. I co-founded Young Brands with Andy Pearson, who was a really good friend of Bob Crandall, and Andy was the head of PepsiCo. But he was, Bob was Andy's most admired CEO, and at the time, I was a big Herb Kelleher fan, from Southwest Airlines. Now, Southwest Airlines, known for spreading love all over Texas. He would drink wild turkey. He was CEO of the year, just like Bob Crandall was CEO of the year. Bob Crandall was seen as that tough-minded, aggressive, tell it like it is kind of guy. Where do you fit in this spectrum of leaders? Because clearly, those are two different guys.
No, they were. And by the way, I was the airline analyst for a decade here at MassMutual. So I financed both Southwest and American, and was an early equity investor in the airline that became JetBlue with David Neeleman. So I know more than a little bit about the airline industry. Look, I've talked to my uncle about this. Bob is 90 years old, and he's still sharp as a tack. He was, kind of the imperial CEO, right? That was the time. And frankly, Herb was as well. Herb, transformed that industry with what he did around standardization and leveraging Love Field as a base and everything. I think times change. I think how cultures evolve has part to do with it. So, I'm not my uncle. I never will be. There are times when I can be a pain in the neck on gory details. But there are times when my biggest job is to be the biggest cheerleader for people. And I think particularly with how our workforces have changed over time, one great example is how many generations are in the workforce today. The right thing for different folks and motivating them and getting the best out of them can be different. So I've tried to adapt and change along the way. If what I'm doing isn't working, I'm going to try something else.
I'm going to keep you back more in your childhood for just one more second. When I was doing my research, I learned that you lost your first money on a stock option when you were 12 years old. Now, Now, looking back now, are you surprised at the path that you've taken to get to be the CEO of this company, or was it in the cards all along that that's where you're going to go down that way?
I liked investing. Yes, I lost money buying a Xerox call option when I was 12, and the only good news was the position was sized appropriately, meaning it was speculative money, and if I lost it, it was okay. Look, I was always fascinated with markets, always liked kind of investing, and my dream job was to become the chief investment officer, which I was before I ultimately became president and CEO. So I never along the way said, I aspire to be a CEO. I was fortunate to do really interesting work with people I really enjoyed working with. That ultimately put me in a position to get this role. But early on, I just thought this intersection of business and how markets price things was just absolutely fascinating. And I think it's still fascinating to this day, 30 some odd years later.
Hey everyone, it's Kula from How Leaders Lead. And if you've watched our podcast for any number of episodes, you probably know that a common theme from all of the great leaders we interview is that they are active learners. They have this commitment to continuing to learn and grow so that they don't stay stagnant and so that they continue to see success in their leadership and in their life. This theme of active learning is so important, and it's what David's latest book, How Leaders Learn, is all about. It's all about helping you develop that skill of active learning so that you too can continue to see success in your leadership and in your life. The book is really entertaining. It pulls stories from some of our greatest podcast guests and pairs those stories with insights that you can incorporate into your leadership and into your life right away. Grab How Leaders Learn on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And I think you're really going to love it. You feel David's personality through the pages and through his storytelling, and it's a really powerful way to level up your leadership.
Well, you've obviously made a lot of good decisions in your career, and I understand though that you chose the University of Vermont largely because you wanted to ski. Now, how would you say your decision-making process has evolved over time, Roger?
Well, look, I think you still always have to decide what's at some point you got to call the play. What's the most important decision? So there were several factors that tied to the University of Vermont. But I certainly enjoyed skiing, and my parents thought going out west was too far, so Vermont it was. I think what's happened over time, I've realized a couple of things. One is, boy, is it a valuable thing to get input from a lot of different and sources. If you're convinced you're right, and you surround yourself with people who think the same way, I always really took lessons out of what happened with the U.S. and Vietnam with McNamara and kind of groupthink. So I certainly over time I've come to the view that having lots of input is valuable, but at some point you still do have to call the play. So you want to encourage that debate. You want to get all the pieces out there. But I've done more of that, I think, over time. Early on in my career, especially if I thought I was right, I was very sure I was right. And I guess markets have a way of humbling people. And I must be the luckiest guy in the world because I've seen 5-6 standard deviation events in my time in this job in markets. So I think a little being humble is a really good idea.
It makes a lot of sense. And your first job, as you mentioned, out of college was at MassMutual, which your father worked at that company. And what drew you into that business?
Oh, it was simple. I needed a job, and the market had crashed in '87, and I couldn't find one in New York. I was in a PhD program in economics, and I thought I was good at math until I met people who were really good at math, and decided I wanted to go to work. And that was a really good plan until the market crashed, and there was absolutely nothing. So I'd previously applied and been offered a job at MassMutual as a pension sales representative, actually in Wellesley, Mass. My dad was a sales guy, and he was an exceptional sales guy. I was more of an analyst and said, I'm not going to go into sales. So I got the opportunity to come here and work in a real estate investment analyst training program. And frankly, I thought I'd stay 2 years tops. Then I moved back to New York. And instead, my girlfriend moved up here. We got married. We had kids. And again, I got to do really interesting work with really great people, and I never left. But there were a lot of kind of pieces that fell in. But fundamentally, I was so thrilled to get a job offer because I was about to move out of my apartment because I didn't have money for rent, and I was going to have to move back in with my parents. And that was not a great plan. So,
what do you think you did early on in your career, if you really look at it? And I know you're a humble guy, so you don't like to talk about yourself so much, but what do you think you did that really helped you stand out and rise through the ranks?
I think, again, I had some really, really, really good bosses. But you know what? I ended up becoming an expert in a very esoteric space. And I advise young folks really become an expert in something. It doesn't even particularly matter what it is, but you want to be that go-to person. I ended up doing a rotation through a securitized products group in commercial mortgages before there were effectively any securitization of commercial mortgages. So this was before the RTC started securitizing all the bad assets it took out of the S&L crisis. And the only thing that was really being securitized at the time was residential mortgages. But at one point, I knew every commercial mortgage-backed securities deal that was done in the United States because there were like less than 10. And that understanding of securitization technology, and then that rolled over into credit. So MassMutual is one of the earliest companies to issue what was called a collateralized bond obligation. You might have heard of a collateralized loan obligation, a big part of the loan markets today. I learned how those things worked. And so all of a sudden, at a pretty young age, I was kind of the expert on them. Again, we had some great leaders at MassMutual that gave us, I guess, enough room to work on things and make mistakes and try to innovate. And that's something I kind of try to do today. But I think early on, becoming an expert in CMBS and in securitization and how to connect those dots to other asset classes, probably was a really big success. Well, not probably, it was a big win for me professionally too.
Was that an area that nobody really wanted to go in at the time and you just seized the opportunity?
I was going to go after a classic one-year training program. I had some choices about where to go. They said, "Where would you like to go?" And I was going to go to Chicago. And went out to visit our office out there, thought it would be great. And then tragically, my grandfather was murdered. Someone broke into his house in a robbery and killed him. And my mother was, as you would expect, a complete mess. And she said, "Boy, I wish you weren't going so far away to Chicago." So I went to my boss and said, "Listen, I know I told you I was going to Chicago, but there's a job here working in the securitization space. Could I swap and do that instead?" And they agreed to let me do it. And then shortly thereafter, my boss left. So like I was, I became, the kind of the one. So, a little bit of luck and a little bit of a family kind of tragedy that ended up keeping me here in Springfield, which then gave me exposure to a much broader array of the company. And if I'd gone to Chicago, I would have worked in a real estate origination office. Would have been fabulous. I'm sure I would have enjoyed it. And but who knows where it would have ended up. But by being here, I got to see just a broader array. So I was a generalist very, very early on after that deep specialist. And just got to do a really wide variety of things. And that's, I think, turned out to be a real benefit.
And you said your dream job was to be the chief investment officer, which you got. And I know you had a lot of successes, obviously, but I understand once you took a $3 billion loss on a particular initiative, but you kept getting promoted. I mean, what was
I lost $3 billion on the one hand and made 10 on the other side.
Oh, okay, but that explains it all. But
those subprimes, they did not. They were tough. Those subprime mortgages, they hurt a lot of people. They hurt us pretty bad.
Yeah. But when you look back on that, what was the biggest leadership lesson you took away from that? Losing $3 billion, and obviously you netted out $7 billion in the positive column.
Yeah, I think a couple. Look, I had a boss early on who really hammered into me and all of us that, small and modest-sized problems you manage and big problems manage you. So just creating diversification. I mean, it is an old part of investing, but understanding kind of position sizing so that if something goes wrong, you can manage it and it doesn't take you over. And I saw this front line. I mean, great example, right? Hartford, Connecticut, insurance capital of America. Aetna, Travelers, I mean, they both almost went under because they had so much commercial mortgage exposure in the late 80s, early 90s when the commercial real estate market collapsed. And little MassMutual kind of up the street didn't. right? We in fact thrived kind of through all that because we weren't overexposed to one asset class. So even as fabulous as something looks, I think one thing I learned was, just pay attention to your diversification and that'll give you, time to deal with problems, because big problems come at you like a tidal wave and it's hard to do something about.
And speaking of big problems, you were named president of MassMutual in 2008, right in the middle of the financial crisis. Yippee on that one,
Best possible time ever to become a new president.
Okay,
right?
Explain that to me.
Well, no, again, it's like when the world is under pressure and things are going on, you got lots of flexibility to stand up and make kind of bold decisions, right? If things are going perfectly smoothly, it can be hard sometimes to make bold decisions, but the environment kind of melting down around us ended up being a real blessing as a new president and a new CEO. Again, the company was financially strong and a great company, at a great board, great collection of leaders and great agents and advisors working with us. But I thought it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, but you were also at a time where it's just like uncertain as hell. I mean, I remember I was on the JP Morgan Chase board at that time, and it was like, that little phone call from JB Diamond was one of the scariest I ever got over Labor Day weekend. Okay, so you have to manage in this huge time of uncertainty. What did you pick up about it? How do you lead in those uncertain times where you don't know where it's going to end up?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So one is, and you use the right word, especially in environments like that, people do want to be led. Right? They want someone to stand up and say, hey, it's going to be okay. We have a plan. Let's put our heads down and execute on the plan. Right? And we didn't, get in a position where we had to take, money from the government, which some other insurers did. And we kind of managed through that ourselves. But our ability to stand up and say, look, we've got a plan. Our plan is solid. Let's execute was really worked well. And in fact, that set off a period of growth of MassMutual growing, literally at 4 to 5x the industry growth rate in insurance sales. It ultimately led us from being number 15 in market share to number 2 and number 3. So we got tremendous kind of more scale, because as other people and other companies were grappling with issues, we represented certainty. And that's, again, back to being a mutual. We really began to lean into talking about that. Like, this is different, right? Shareholders are fabulous, but shareholders' time horizon, it lives in a cycle where the board's elected annually by the majority of the shareholders, and the shares turn over 50 times a year with all the trading, right? Well, is that how you want to think about a 50-year or 75-year relationship with a company that's going to be taking care of your spouse if you pass away early, and taking care of your kids and grandkids if you pass away the way you hope to? The answer in my mind is no. So we really leaned into the power and strength of mutuality, and in fact, all of those difficult times really set the stage for us to go through a period of extraordinary growth.
We'll be back with the rest of my conversation with Roger Crandall in just a moment. But first, I want you to hear this insight from Jeff Colvin, who is a senior editor at Fortune magazine and one of the best and brightest thinkers on business and leadership. He's also a big proponent of storytelling, and he knows it's key to really reaching and motivating other people.
Most of our organizations don't really value storytelling. They value charts and graphs. And that's okay. We're going to have to make our business decisions based on data and good analysis of data. That's never going to change. But analysis of data is exactly what technology is doing better and better every day. If we try to distinguish ourselves by doing that, we're going to lose, because the computers do it better and better every day. At the same time, we all know from personal experience, if you want to change people's minds, if you want to have people remember something, and if you want to inspire people to action, don't show them charts and graphs. Tell them a story.
Go back and listen to my entire conversation with Jeff, episode 149, here on How Leaders Lead. And you mentioned earlier that you had your uncle as your mentor, Bob Crandall. And, how did that shape just your thinking on mentorship and, and how to pay it forward?
Oh, it's so important. And it can be little things. I'm reminded of the first time I was asked to go present as the lead analyst on a deal to just an investment committee, right? So relatively early kind of in my career. But at the time, it was like the biggest thing that had ever happened. So I always try to remind myself, in my role, everyone I interact with, it's a big interaction for them, right? So first and foremost, keeping that in mind. And then again, different folks might respond differently to kind of mentoring, but kind of keeping those connections over time. It just sets the stage for people to achieve the most that they can, and that's kind of a really good feeling. But it was a good feeling as an early manager. It's even kind of a better feeling now because one of my jokes, it's not really that much of a joke, I don't do anything anymore. Right. I just help arrange people kind of doing things. And if all goes well, I don't really even need to talk to them all that much other than a pat on the back and you're doing awesome. So it's a powerful thing. And it's, again, I'm the beneficiary of my uncle, but many great mentors here at MassMutual and more broadly in life. And I try to think about that all the time.
I'm like you. I've always felt that the best leaders are coaches. Give me a go-to question you'd like to ask ask people when you're giving them your one-on-ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, one that I think is really important. It's an honest, how are you doing, right? Because people say, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine, right? That's kind of standard, kind of conversation. But everybody has so much stuff going on, and really getting the most out of people is hard, right? Like there's an old joke: how many people work here? About half, right? And actually, that kind of academic research kind of shows that that's about the level of engagement most folks have. So I do really like to get a little bit of a check-in. If not every meeting, pretty regularly, just how are things going, right? Is it, if you got something going on with your family, have any health issues? I mean, just anything. And what can I do, to help? And that gets to the other one. What can I do to help, right? What do you need me to do? What would you like me to do? And if the answer is nothing, keep out of my face, that's great, right? Go forward. But I think understanding where people are and then I very much try to encourage people, especially in today's day and age, you have to compartmentalize and take some time for yourself. The information flow that's out there today is so much, and our ability to have continual access with mobile devices. Yeah, you got to play the long game. So I do encourage people, especially this time of the year, take vacation, turn off the work phone. I have with a very high degree of authority, MassMutual will be here in a week when you come back.
So you've been, in this role for more than a decade, and yet I understand one of the things that you talk about is the need to reinvent yourself every 4 or 5 years. Okay, talk about how you've done that.
Yeah, well, let's start with, again, you said I got lucky, right? Came in just as there was a huge financial crisis, but that huge financial crisis then created a completely new regulatory environment, and it was a global regulatory environment. So at that time, MassMutual had significant insurance businesses internationally as well as here in the U.S. But all of the changes that came out of the great financial crisis, particularly around regulatory capital between European companies and American companies, effectively began to push Europeans out of the insurance market. So we saw it as an opportunity to really double down on the U.S. We ultimately sold businesses in Hong Kong and in Chile and in Luxembourg and in Japan. And deployed all that capital to write insurance on more Americans. So, the world, as the regulatory world changed, it enabled us to make a strategy change to become a scale manufacturer of insurance products. And then again, this wasn't me saying, it's 4 years in, I need to do something different. But it became very clear that distribution was going to continue to take a bigger share of the profit pool in the insurance business. So we really leaned into investing in distribution, and that was a change. It included us adding a third-party distribution organization, not through our own agents, which culturally was a big thing. The company was a very agent-driven distribution kind of company. So again, the way I think about it, there were natural changes the company should have been making because of the changing kind of environment, both macro, obviously the zero interest rate environment was a really big deal for the life insurance industry for a long time. And it just so happened that I had to kind of reinvent both myself and the company kind of along the way. So that's been a way I've tried to kind of stay kind of current. And of course, maybe the biggest change ever is playing out right now, and that's the rise of AI and agentic AI. We'll see how that plays out over the next few years. But I think every CEO today is thinking a lot about how is their company and industry going to be different in a world with these large language models powered the way they are today.
What do you see as the most promising ways that AI will change your business?
Look, I think the first is no one has ever woken up and said after they say, yes, I want to go buy a life insurance policy, they go, well, that was the greatest buying experience I've ever had in my life. When it includes someone showing up at your door, to take bodily fluids and with a scale. I am optimistic we are going to be able to use AI and machine learning to have the underwriting process be as predictive but less invasive. Because what we're really trying to do is give everyone the lowest possible cost of insurance. And we need to understand what we're doing is predicting your future mortality. So I am optimistic it's going to make end customer experience easier. I also think it's going to make distribution partners experience easier. And again, many folks in the financial ecosystem do an extraordinary job of thinking about the investment side of things, but they don't think much about how protection kind of plays in. I think there's a great opportunity to integrate protection into the process more smoothly, and that's going to enable more people to have coverage. Because it's kind of wild. Half the people who have life insurance, when you ask them, do you need more life insurance, say yes. And 70% of the people who don't have life insurance say, hey, I really should have it. Not sure about the other 30%, but again, there's a rich opportunity, but there's a perception that it's more expensive than it is, and there's a perception which may be sometimes real that it can be a not a great user experience because like I say, anytime you've got to go deep into somebody's health like that to give them the best offer, it can be more invasive and take longer than they'd like. So I think there's a big opportunity for those things to kind of change going forward, and that'll help ultimately the over 100 million Americans that either don't have coverage or don't have nearly enough, hopefully get it, and that'll make their families more secure.
How are you resourcing the business to take advantage of this seismic change with AI?
Yeah. So, and again, boy, it's changing quick. So it turns out I got lucky, right? I literally got an email from someone who found me in the Wharton alumni network who'd gone to Wharton, sent me an email and said, hey, I'm looking for a place to work for the next 20 years. And my wife is from Amherst, Massachusetts, which is right up the road here. I got that email. I called him, brought the guy in, and he ultimately worked in a lot of things with us. But he convinced me of the need to kind of really build a data science capability. And we decided to build it ourselves, not to kind of outsource it. So we actually worked with the University of Massachusetts and Smith and Mount Holyoke, and we brought kind of professors on, and we kind of built our own program. And as part of that, we built data architecture around it as well. And again, I barely knew what these things really were. I mean, I'd read about them, but it turned out that getting our data organized was integral to being able to now play the game that we're playing, where we've kind of accelerated things from beta test into early production to actually take advantage of these AI tools. That said, I still think we are not even 2 innings in baseball terms into this game. Maybe we're only in the first inning, but that has set us up. So we needed technical expertise, but critically we had to own it ourselves and not depend on an outsourced partner. Now, outsourced partners can be hugely valuable and are hugely valuable to us, but I wanted to have enough of that kind of core capability inside the company to know the questions to ask and to try to be more thoughtful about how we rolled it out.
What do you think leaders today should be doing to get smart about AI?
Again, back to get a lot of views and get a lot of opinions. I think a couple of things that I'm doing. One is absolutely talking to other CEOs in other industries to see how it's being applied. Spending a lot of time talking to, I've got a lot of cousins, nieces, and nephews. Yeah, it's interesting talking to someone who's about to go to college who's used AI to effectively answer the question they were given in high school, and then used AI to mask that they used AI before they show it to the professor or showed it to the teacher. So I am trying to spend time with more digital natives. Of course, you're going to talk to the quote unquote usual suspects that are here to sell you something. Sometimes you learn something, but I don't know that it's worth the price of admission. But I do see how it's being used elsewhere is really important, and that I'd say playing around with it a fair amount myself. And it's been absolutely fascinating to me to see the
how do you
evolution.
do that?
So I'm using just ChatGPT and Grok, and I've just got apps on my phone, and I'm just personally just either putting information into them, asking questions, asking them to manipulate it. So I'm just kind of rolling up my sleeves, literally just as a hobbyist, I guess would be the way to think about it, and then come in and talk about it with the team. But I still feel I've got this nagging sense I'm not going fast enough in that space, and we run the risk of falling behind if somebody else gets there first.
Well, you haven't fallen behind in terms of the results you've generated. You've had revenue growth year after year, big revenue growth. How do you, as a leader, how do you overlap great success? What's your learning on how to get an organization to go to the next step after you have one great year? Now you got to do it again. That wears people out. How do you do it?
Well, again, I keep kind of going back to this purpose of the company, right? I mean, so it's again, the numbers, all these big numbers are hard to wrap your head around, right? $40 billion in revenue, $1 trillion in coverage. I mean, it's like, how do you? So I keep kind of going back to what we did last year. We paid claims to 112,000 families. That's 112,000 situations that really stunk, most likely, but at least the part of stinking of not having money to pay a college tuition was taken care of. So again, it's not about taking I love high compound annual growth rates over time, but more importantly, I just like having more families. So I mean, again, keep telling those stories about how we help folks is a pretty good way to do it.
As a leader, do you think that's the greatest difference you do in terms of driving results? I mean, if you had to pick one thing that you do that contributes to these results, what would it be? The thing, your differentiator?
I think it all comes down to having the right team, the right leaders. I think we've made some things you can look back, decisions that you can say, oh, that was a good strategic decision. And of course, we made them with the best information kind of available at the time. I think building leadership teams over time that, kind of buy into the purpose and mission of the company. And then frankly, being aligned with the board as well, right? It's a unique situation. We're not being public. It's you have to think about how do you create the right long-term incentive plans to align interests, on where timelines may be different. Again, I've got 150,000 policyholders that have been with us 50 years or more. That's kind of wild. My oldest policyholder's been with us 91 years currently. Sadly, the oldest policyholder turns over with some regularity, but having a policy 90 plus years is pretty common. You got to kind of keep that kind of alignment. But I think my biggest thing is getting the right people, setting the strategy, and then encouraging them to go.
Great people want to work for leaders that they trust. So I'm curious, Roger. What's one thing you've done intentionally to build trust within your leadership team?
I've really, really had the view that first, be transparent and authentic. Again, I could have smiled and put on a Red Sox shirt and walked out and thrown out the first pitch when they asked me to. And I said, over my dead body. So I think being authentic in everything is very important. And then I think people can tell if you're authentic or not, and then that begins to feed on itself. So, again, once I figured out how special this company is in terms of thinking about things in a multi-generational way, about being aligned with our policyholders, about always doing the right things for the policyholders, people see that and it kind of pays off. So I think that transparency and authenticity is a really big deal. And then I've got your back, right? Mistakes happen. If things don't go well, I'm not going to throw you out. If you lie, cheat, or steal, okay, well, that's different. It's a complex world out there, and if things don't go well, I want to make sure we have your back as well.
And I've seen where you've said it's important to remember your past mistakes rather than push them underneath the rug. What's a mistake that you personally keep coming back to because of how much you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I will go back. We joked about losing $3 billion, and I joked about making 10 kind of somewhere else. We should not have lost that $3 billion. And again, it was something where, there were people talking about the froth that was going on in the U.S. housing market at the time, and there were people talking about what was happening with the really aggressive lending practices. But relied too much on the perceived wisdom, which was home prices don't fall. Right, they haven't fallen since the Great Depression. Right, that was what everyone was kind of saying at the time. So I kind of go back to that one and back to this, making sure you're really talking to a wide array of folks. I also think it set up. Again, we got a little bit of groupthink there that hurt us in terms of getting our positions in the size they were. So I wish we'd only lost $1 billion instead of the 3, I guess.
Sometimes that's good.
Yeah,
that would have been pretty good back
then. The size of the balance sheet, right?
With all the responsibility and the prestige you have when you have the top role, I mean, what's one practice or mindset that keeps you grounded?
Yeah, like one for me is, and again, I'm really fortunate. We have agents in every state. As well as in some U.S. territories. So I do get the opportunity to get around the country and talk to our advisors. And to me, it's a great reminder of what we do and how it works. And it's also a great reminder to me of just how big and broad our country is. So again, sitting here in Massachusetts today, and Massachusetts is just different than being in Tennessee. It's just different than being in Washington State. It's just different than being in Arizona. So I really, really, really like getting out and talking to our advisors who are, we've got about 7,000. They're from 22 years old to 78 years old. And it's a really, really, really great way to remind me of what we really do and how we make a difference for folks.
Roger, it's been so much fun, and I want to have some more with you with a lightning round of questions that I always ask. So are you ready for this?
I'm afraid so.
The 3 words that best describe you.
Intense, joking, a little analytical, I guess.
If you could be one person for a day besides yourself, who would it be?
Babe Ruth and the 27 Yankees.
Your biggest pet peeve?
Being late. I hate being late.
Who would play you in a movie?
I'll have to ask my wife, but we'll go with Brad Pitt.
Oh, well, I was thinking Ben Affleck might be in there.
Okay.
Your favorite place to fly fish?
I'm going to go with Tarpon off of Isla Morada.
All right. And how about skiing?
My son lives in Colorado, so I love skiing in Vail.
And you might have answered this, but your favorite Yankees player of all time?
My favorite player is actually Mariano Rivera.
Oh, he was awesome. What's the one thing you do just for you?
The one thing I've been doing for a while just for me is I meditate every morning for 10 minutes to try to get grounded before the day starts. And that's totally me time.
Besides your family, what's your most prized possession?
My old pair of skis that I've been using once in a while just for fun that I've had since I was in college.
If I turned on the radio in your car, what would I hear?
Well, probably CNBC.
What's something about you few people would know?
I've been told this, that I've actually got a pretty good sense of humor. I come across as I am smiling kind of guy. But I do like a good joke.
What's one of your daily rituals besides meditation that you never miss?
I got to do my push-ups when I wake up in the morning.
That's great. We're out of the lightning round. Super job. I got a few more questions. I'll let you get back to selling some life insurance here. But, how do you lead at home, Roger? I mean, what do you try to do when you go home?
I try to remind myself I am not the CEO of the family. I'm the husband, and I'm the father, or I'm the son, or I'm the brother. So I try very hard to remember that they're not the CEO at home. My wife reminds me frequently I have opportunities to improve my success factor in that one.
Then what's the biggest thing you've learned from your wife about leadership?
Far and away the biggest is the old saying. It's how you make people feel. and a few moments with anybody can make them feel like they've been seen or heard, and everyone wants to be seen and heard.
How about your kids?
You know, it's interesting. Neither of my kids are in the financial field, and what I've learned, one in particular is a filmmaker, is how much I can learn from him about something I know anything about, and that's the creative side. I'm not an artist. He is, and he has something to teach me every day about that.
And what's the biggest thing you learned from that?
You know, you may think you know everything, or you know a lot, and you know thimblefuls of what there is out there to know. So it's very humbling.
And what do you see as your unfinished business, Roger?
I'll tell you on the MassMutual side. Look, we've had a great run, but the next, I think, 5 years is going to redefine how this industry looks. This integration of asset management and insurance is entering the end game, and the consolidation of distribution is the same way. So I've brought us to the final round of the poker game is the way I think about it. We need to get to the end of the poker game and make sure we're a scale player when the consolidation is all finished.
And last question here: what's one piece of advice you'd give to anyone who wants to be a better leader?
Absolutely, just spend time with your people. Right, you have to understand people's hopes, dreams, and fears to be able to help drive them to achieve something bigger than themselves. And there's no way to do it from the outside. You've got to be, as Roosevelt said, you got to be in the arena. And there's nowhere more important to be in the arena with your own people.
I got to ask you before I let you go. You know, you talk about the importance of stories. What do you think is the most? Can you tell us the most powerful story you have in your business career?
It's the story of how this place started. A 27-year-old who was a Connecticut mutual agent said, gosh darn it, Massachusetts should have a mutual company too. And he raised $100,000 from 31 people. He started MassMutual, also became the mayor of Springfield. And that $100,000 and 31 people is now $34 billion of capital, $1 trillion of coverage, and 4 million, policyholders. And it just started with someone saying, I can do this. Why can't I do this? Right. And I would love to, it would be kind of cool to go back in time and spend a day with Kyle Bryce and be like, what were you doing? But again, seemed like a normal thing to him. Let's just raise some money, start a company. Here we are 175 years later, one of the biggest in our industry and still headquartered here in Springfield. And you and your people are doing it. So congratulations. And thank you so much, Roger, for being on this show. Appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great talking with you. I got to tell you, Roger Crandall surprised me a little today. Yeah, he's analytical. And yes, he knows the numbers inside and out, but he also knows that behind every data point is a person, a story, and a purpose. And that's what makes his leadership so compelling. Let me tell you, when you're asking people to work hard or navigate change or rally around a long-term goal, you got to give them more than data points and KPIs. You got to give them something bigger, that noble cause that we all need to feel connected to our work. Roger is so good about telling those stories and listening to other stories too, so he never loses sight of what the numbers mean and why they matter. So here's your challenge this week. Think about a big number you're trying to hit, a revenue or sales goal maybe. Now ask yourself, how can you bring the number to life? Is there a story you can tell, a way to represent it with a little more humanity? That's how you connect with people to that goal in a way that ties into their values or their identity. So do you want to know how leaders lead? What we learned today is that great leaders make the numbers mean something. Coming up next on How Leaders Lead is Tom Hale, CEO of Aura. So be sure you subscribe on your YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss it. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of How Leaders Lead, where every Thursday you get to listen in while I interview some of the very best leaders in the world. I make it a point to give you something simple on each episode that you can apply to your business so that you will become the best leader you can be.